ES Audio. From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Rachel Abbott and this is The Leader. Today we're giving you some bonus content taken from our business show, How to Be a CEO. An opportunity to hear from the most powerful people behind some of the world's biggest brands. This is a cut-down version of the full episode. To hear the full thing, hit the link in the show notes. Find a new episode of How to Be a CEO every Monday morning, and why not give it a rate and follow whilst you're there? Now, let's begin.
Some of the best known brands in the world may seem like they've always been there, but even those names that appear traditional now were once disruptors.
I was talking about Johnnie Walker creating blended whiskey. He also created a square bottle because it was easier to transport. He was disrupting himself and he was disrupting the market.
Catharina von Franck is an SVP at Diageo and sits on the UK board of the company that owns Johnnie Walker, Guinness, Smirnoff, Baileys, the list goes on. And as Channel Growth Director, it's her job to make sure those brands don't just survive, but thrive. And that means constant innovation, sometimes in spaces where history matters.
It's important to, again, obviously to have the consumer at the heart, but then also to look at your heritage and to look at what inspired you and your mission and your purpose and try to move that along, in a purposeful way.
I'm David Marson from the Evening Standard, and Diageo itself is going through some changes in the UK. They've just opened a new office in London's Soho, right at the heart of the capital's hospitality industry. It should have happened last year, but pandemic. And it's in that new HQ that we're meeting Catharina. How exciting is it to step into a new building like this, a new HQ for Diageo?
So it's obviously incredibly exciting, and I just, cast my mind back to a month ago, and it felt like I've been with the company for 10 years. It felt like starting school on my first day, packing my bag and, just thinking about what I needed to take. But then also we're in Great Marlborough Street, just opposite Carnaby, in the heart of Soho, just walking towards our office and seeing the hospitality industry. And I remember there were some kegs of Guinness being delivered. Somebody else was getting their condiment trays ready, for the day. And I think it's so exciting after, the 2 very difficult years that we've had, getting ready, thriving again. For us, it obviously also means a huge investment into London. It's one of the 2 investments that we're making throughout this year and next year. We've also got our Guinness Old Brewers Yard, the micro brewery, which is opening in the autumn of next year. So that's a huge £73 million investment that we're investing into London. And it's really recognising, I think, London as the hub of hospitality and pooling our 4 offices that we previously had around London into one hub at the centre of hospitality, essentially.
Yeah, that's a lot of money going into the capital. Why? Why London?
Throughout my career, my life, I've actually lived in quite a few large cities, New York being one, Copenhagen, and also Milan. And I just find London is really one of the, if not the centre and heart of soul of hospitality. So if you look at, for example, the world's 50 best bars, which is an award that's given, it's like the Oscars essentially for hospitality. Which is given to the world's leading bars. London is, always represented there with some of the key bars there, often taking the first spot. So I encourage everybody who hasn't been, to go to one of those bars. It truly is an amazing experience. There's obviously also London Cocktail Week. So, at the very top end, but also even at the, at the mid-tier, I find London really leading from a trend perspective. We're not afraid to disrupt in the industry. So, and us obviously as a leader in beverage alcohol, I think it's only natural for us to then be at the heart of that.
You're a bit of a brand expert, so I can't really have a conversation with you without talking about how to grow a brand. When you're thinking about maybe smaller companies just starting up, what kind of mistakes do people make when they're trying to grow a brand? What sort of things should they be avoiding as well as getting their name out there?
So I think we talk a lot about standing on the shoulders of giants. So if you're mentioning those brands like Guinness, for example, absolute powerhouse of a brand. Johnnie Walker, absolute powerhouse, and we've got so many with Smirnoff, Baileys, Tanqueray. So I think there's a real respect that we try to demonstrate as temporary custodians of these brands, and recognizing the heritage and where they've come from. And there's actually an element of, I think, creativity and also disruption in each of these brands and how they were created. So for example, if I look at Arthur Guinness, for example, he was making stout at a time where everybody else was making, pale beer. He made, a really full flavored, strong and dark one. Johnnie Walker, for example, he created, his first, essentially at a time when everybody was doing single malts, he created his first blend. So he wasn't afraid to push the boundaries. And I think what we try to do is embody some of that spirit when we look at how we extend our brands today. It's obviously got to be driven by the consumer. It's always got to be driven by what the consumer would like, what they perhaps don't know they would like. But then also just looking at trying to make our brands a force for good. So as an example of that, on Guinness, for example, we have a huge association with rugby. It's where it's where we're consumed. It's what we sponsor. However, there was a stat that really surprised me. Only 4% of media coverage is actually around women's sport, which also historically isn't an area that Guinness has played in. But then when I talk about, our brands being a force for good, that's really something that we've tried to further in terms of expanding our brand. So partnering, for example, with the likes of Wikipedia to look at some key athletes' profiles, and to make sure that they are verified, that they are, as strong as some of the male athletes' profile, just to level the playing field. Likewise, on Twitter, just verifying their profiles there. So just really pushing our boundaries there in the same sense that probably Arthur Guinness would have done, all that time ago, not being afraid. And we've obviously got large brands. We're looking also always to expand our portfolio. So we're purchasing some smaller brands in areas where perhaps we haven't had our strength. We have a huge agenda in low and no alcohol, for example. Yeah. So Seedlip is one of the key acquisitions over the last few years that we're moving into a space that, perhaps as an beverage alcohol company, you wouldn't expect us to make a move in. We're looking to reinvent ourselves. We're looking to disrupt, and I think you need to do that. If you're building a brand, you have to be a disruptor, and you have to be unafraid to disrupt yourself as well.
You said that you feel like the custodian of a brand, and clearly you've done your research into the history of these things. Was that important to you when you take over something like Guinness?
Absolutely, and I think it's so inspiring to hear the stories of our founders, whether they be new founders, like for example George Clooney, with Casamigos, and how that originated, or all those years ago with Johnnie Walker and Arthur Guinness. So if I look at myself as custodian, I see myself as essentially the torchbearer for a period of time on that brand, and I want to be true to the brand. I want to reinvent, and I want to think about what the people who created those brands would do in this current environment.
Do you think just opening this building itself is a symbol? Diageo's staying, we're not going away, we can help you?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge commitment from our part into the capital, because we're seeing people come back to the office. We're seeing people, really thrive also in wanting to go out for after work drinks, more so than we had, even a year ago. So we're seeing people come back and really wanting to foster those connections. I'm a big fan of tech, and I think it's been, absolutely incredible in terms of enabling some of the flexible working, and I truly embrace that. But I think there's something special about sitting down, having a pint of ice cold Guinness, and just being authentic.
Presumably you're not offering pints of Guinness at every meeting that you have, but are people coming back to this office? Are they excited to return?
Yeah, we've had quite a few discussions around this, because I think we were all we've always enabled very flexible working at Diageo, and I think we'd become quite used to it. But if you look at the office and how it's built up, it's really built up with our employees at the very heart. So even in the creation of it, employees fed into the process. And if you take a tour around the office, you can see that there are very many different spaces. So some spaces for more formal meetings. There are very informal meetings. We've got 2 world-class bars as well. So whilst I'm not going to be able to serve a Guinness at every meeting, it does take some formality out of the conversation. It's great for that. We've also got a hugely attractive offering then from a wellness perspective. We've got an exercise and fitness room right on the top floor. We've got art around the walls. We've got some living walls here. There's a lot of greenery in the office, and just bringing people together. I think they've really yearned for that connectivity. They just pop to the pub on a Thursday, or they might bring some friends into some of our bars, and that just gives me great energy to come into work every day and do what I do.